Welcome to Unmute Yourself, the podcast. I'm Nancy Medoff, author, speaker, and coach.
And I'm Beth Knaus, creative copywriter and the owner of That's a Spade Copywriting Services. We are done being polite and ready to get real about confidence, boundaries, and self-respect, both personally and in the workplace.
Beth and I first met when we collaborated on the best-selling communication handbook for women, Unmute Yourself and Speak Up to Stand Out. Now we are amplifying our message and taking it on the road with Unmute Yourself, the podcast. Warning, there may be, no, who are we kidding, will be some adult content. We have a bullshit button and we're not afraid to use it.
So buckle up, buttercups, because here we go.
Podsters, we're back and Beth is eating dark chocolate.
Oh, I love it. It's good for you, you know. It's just pure dark chocolate.
Is it cacao? Cacao? I just like to say cacao.
I like to say it too. Cacao.
So Podsters, we're back, and boy, are we psyched for this episode because this has been a long time coming. This has been a long time coming. Yeah.
And for our Podsters, I think they should know, like, we go through this wacky process where it's either in a document that we have or we're on Vox or kind of back and forth about, what is really the core of this discussion? Like, what is it? And sometimes we have to dig a little bit to get at it, but it took us a bit to get to this one, but I think we know what it is now.
I think we do. And I think we should just dive in. So we are talking about what to do when your confidence is shook. And I am not talking about, and Beth, you can feel free to jump in and clarify because maybe you are, but I don't think you are. I'm not talking about when you have to go on stage and your confidence is shook. I'm not talking about when you have to speak up in a meeting and your confidence is shook. There are tactical things that you can do. Those are brief moments in time. I am talking about when your belief system or your world or whatever has got you at a place where you're like, WTF is even going on? And you're shook and your confidence is shook. Anything to clarify there, Beth? Did I do a good job?
Yeah, and I think it's not just one thing that happens. It's kind of like there's a series. It's like you get hit in the head and you stand up, you get hit in the head again, you stand up, you get hit in the head again. And it's like, wow, what is happening? I'm getting slammed. So there's so many things I think we've learned over time just hearing people say, right? Like, oh, things happen in threes, or, I just lost it. There was another one, but there are these things that people have made up along the way to deal with it. But at the end of the day, we're really talking about things that happen that were unexpected, that we don't necessarily know what the outcome is going to be from these things. And they're not within our control, because if they were, we wouldn't let them happen, right? So it can be a health thing, or it can be, just anything that surprises you that you weren't expecting. It kind of knocks you off your feet.
Exactly. And or all of the above, right? So the way this came to light most recently is Beth and I were talking about a spiral when there's just something's happening. So both Beth and I had some challenges in 2022. Mine were towards the latter half of the year. And I was going through my year in pictures actually for an Instagram post. And as I was going through my year in pictures, I was like, wow, I had hit, and I mean negative, after hit after hit. I mean, it started in April with me burning my foot quite badly, might I add, and not being able to exercise for 6 weeks and having to take a cross-country flight with a flip-flop and get on stage with a flip-flop. Sounds ridiculous now. 6 weeks I couldn't exercise. That's a big deal for me. And it started there. There were other medical issues thrown in there. There were 4 visits to urgent care. There was my mother fell and hurt herself in my home. Ambulance had to take her away. I mean, she's fine now. And it just kept going and going and going. And I'm not used to that. And so the question was that Beth and I and a few other people have been talking about is, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? And what do you do when you're in that spiral and when things are out of your control? So is it just your time? Is it things happen in threes? Is it, which this was more than 3 for the record. Is it why does the spiral continue, and how to get out of that spiral, and how to go back to what you know you need to do to take control back or to get your confidence back. So I'm saying control, it's still out of your control, but it's to get your confidence back.
Right. Right. Yeah. Um, and I think there's a couple of things here, right? So I think, and I hate that so many of us, when we're talking about stuff, we keep going back to the flipping pandemic, but it was earth shattering, right? What happened. And I think for many of us, we thought 2022 was going to be like, okay, this is going to be my first full year back in regular life, regular work. Everything's going to be great. And we're going to have a nice, light, easy year because we just had some crappy years and whatever. And that's not necessarily what happened, right? There were still some shifts going on and adjustments, and we basically lived in fight or flight, right? Low key or high key during the whole thing. And I feel like sometimes then when you can let your guard down, that's when other things can kind of come up for you also. So I think we had that underlying, which again, none of us had control over that, right? And then you have these things that happen, and because there's a fear and there's an unknown, it takes up, or seems to take up, much more space than it really should. And we get consumed by it. So it's really like, how do you stop yourself from getting consumed by it? Like, it's happening and you have to deal with it, but there's also other things happening around it too. Like you had said, you had a couple of things that went on and on and on, but you also got to spend time with your grandkids, and you also got to have some downtime at the beach, and you also had these other things. And I think it's just a matter of seeing that our first reaction is to say, oh my gosh, last year was a tough year for me. I did this and this, before we say, oh, you know what? I actually got to do this, that if everything was going fine and dandy, I would have not had the time for that. But I think we need to think about, right? That just doesn't come naturally to us. It's not human nature.
Yeah. So yes. And I think what I'm hearing is to make sure that when you're looking, if you're in this, if you're lacking confidence for whatever reason, right? For you to go back to, well, what good is happening right now? What's happening that's good? Or yeah, trying to find the silver lining. And I really don't like that term. Or thinking about what, yes, is basically what I'm saying. Yes, because as I was describing my year, I describe it as the year of suck, right? That's how I described it. And for those of you who would prefer I use the word yuck, I will use that from now on moving forward. But so it was bad. There was a lot of bad things. But there were so many good things that were in there, to Beth's point, so many good things that were in there. And I didn't focus on those. I just focused on this keeps happening, and this and this and this and this and this. And I'm not the only one. There were a lot of people who had a tough 2022. And I remember I was talking to a friend of mine who had a rough fall and a rough, I think maybe summer. She had a similar spiral, if you will. And we were going back and forth, leaving messages for each other on this. And she said, it was bare minimum. What do I need to do? Head down, fight or flight. What do I need to do to keep going, forward? And that's when it dawned on me, when she left me this message, that her bare minimum did not include anything about her. It was about her family. It was about her husband. It was about her business. There was nothing in there for her. And that's the same thing I did. I when a series of unfortunate events kept happening, I got spun. I got shook. My confidence was shook because this doesn't happen to me, right? Like, of course, bad things happen to me, but hit after hit after hit, I'm like, what is going on? What am I doing? How am I putting this out there in the universe? When really what was happening was my confidence was shook, and I was stepping away from who I am and everything that I know I need to do to stay true to who I am. So had I done that, so for example, I wasn't journaling in the morning. I wasn't, burning my candles. I love burning candles. It brings me joy. I wasn't drinking enough water. I wasn't doing any of those things that I preach, right? And either that impacted my ability to deal with what was happening, or that impacted my definition of who I was and who I am, which further exacerbated the problem and further created that spiral.
Yeah. Yeah. So when we were, hashing out what we were going to talk about here, one of the things that I had written down was, what's the moral of the story? And the moral of the story is like, when these things happen, life still goes on, right? There's all this other stuff that's happening either way. And so you have to ask yourself, how do you want it to go when these things are happening out of our control? How do you want the other pieces to go? And um, one of the things I think we're realizing, and mostly for women, but I'm sure it's for men as well, is that we do not acknowledge what we're doing because we're always, I want to get ahead and I want this and I want to move forward. But we really need to be present and be aware. Oh, today I tied my shoes. So I'm going to buy myself a Starbucks. I'm
Right.
obviously just being, I'm exaggerating, but, if you have a micro accomplishment or a smaller accomplishment in your week, you need to acknowledge it, right? And you need to record it somewhere so that when you get caught in this spiral, right? So I was just thinking of this, Nancy, you'll either love this or hate this. It's almost like emotional, like gravity pulling on you like a whirlpool, right? And you need to have these other things, like you were talking about journaling and everything else. Those are your floaties,
Yeah,
right? They're like
100%.
your life jacket. They're like your life jacket. And, if you can write them down and you can give yourself, commensurate rewards for the accomplishments, like even if it's just to lay down and meditate in the middle of the day for 10 minutes or to
Hmm.
stretch or call a friend just to, take a break so that you acknowledge, oh, I did this thing. I'm going to give myself something for it because it was hard work. And also focusing on what we talked about last week in our podcast, which is what are your words? Can you go back to the word or words that you chose for your year? Or if you're choosing words for your month, can you look at those and get grounded by those, right? Think of them as like magnets, right? Pulling you down into, your foundation of how you do stuff and where your confidence is.
100%. There's so much that I want to add to this. So good. So yes, and we talked about in December 20th, we talked about celebrating your wins and the importance of celebrating your wins. And one of the things that we uncovered in researching for that podcast was that the best way to ensure burnout is to blow through your wins and not acknowledge them. And that is what happened to me. And this is not easy for me to admit. I'm a public speaker. People hire me as a coach. And I was burnt out. 100% that's what happened because the past couple weeks, I've done less. I've really decompressed and I'm like, oh, okay, this is it. Now I'm back. I'm back because I lost myself when I lost that confidence. And when I was in that emotional whirlpool, I love that term. Um, and and also I have the list. It's called my Thrive list. Here's what you can do when you're feeling out of sorts to get you back to yourself, right? I was like, no, I'm not pulling out a list. I'm too busy, or there's too much happening, or I don't know why. I have the tools, I didn't use them. So the key is that you have to use them. I have this list. I could have pulled the list out and said, I'm going to go to bed early. And I didn't. I went to bed late almost every night because I was like, no, I'm, I don't know if I was acting out. We can drill down on that on another one, but, who knows? But it was almost self-sabotage. It was almost like I was in this emotional whirlpool and I'm like, well, I might as well just, which I know everybody feels and I know we've all done it and I know we all have our ways of getting out of it. What was fascinating to me now that I'm not burnt out anymore and now that I rested and now that I'm back to doing what I know that helps me thrive, I can say, okay, so why couldn't I do it when I was in it? And I believe, and it was Beth that just pointed this out to me, it was because my confidence was shook. I didn't believe that Thrive list was going to work. I didn't believe, I'm like, no, I'm way past that. It's not true. I know it works.
Right.
And I want to add one more thing because you mentioned words. Yes, yes, the word that you're choosing. I also know how important it is to think about the words that you're using in that situation. And I'm going to give you an example. And it's about being real. I I was talking to a friend and I said, "Oh, I have to go see someone." And I said, oh no, let me reframe. I get to go see this person, right? I don't know if you all have heard this. A common word switch is I have to versus you get to. And I appreciate that. I appreciate what it means. It means I'm alive. I get to go see this person, right? But that wasn't working. That was not real for me. I didn't want to go see this person. Like I didn't want to. So let's admit it. So rather than I have to, and rather than be fake and inauthentic and say, oh, I get to go do this when I wasn't feeling it and I didn't want to do it, I changed my words again and I said, I'm going to go see this person. Factual, unemotional, fine. Not I have to, like, I have to. And not, oh, I get to and fake, but I'm going to go just, yep, that's what I'm going to do. So that is another example of how the words impact the
Yeah.
feelings.
Yeah. And we definitely down the road are going to have some podcasts about words and language and what we're using them for, right? And how they help us and how sometimes they don't. And it's good to make some shifts. So
Definitely, because shifts happen.
that's
Did you see what I did there?
right. And I will say, I feel like I need to say this. It's very quick. I think I mention all the time. I mention all the things that I learned from my dad, Billy Griffin, and
Billy.
Billy Boy Griffin. And he used to say, tell me, the older you get, the more you will see how little control you have, and that what you can control is what you do and what your choices are and how you handle things. Right?
Totally agree with Billy.
So how do you handle that spiral? You have a thrive list. That's how.
So how would you handle it?
So for me, I think when those things happen, I really have to get down to like not only one day at a time, 1 hour at a time, like, okay, what can I do? What's in my control? I do go there to that place and say, what's into my control? What can I do right now that's going to help me inch out of this shit show mess or whatever's going on?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and just really kind of not look at the big picture, right? And just really try not to look at the big picture and just look 2 feet in front of me. Try and
I
dig
love
my
it. Yeah. 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 So, I posted about this on social media and it was very interesting the different reactions that I got. And it was a calculated risk because usually I'm the cheerleader and I'm the empowerment speaker and all of that. And this was about I had a rough year and here's what I learned. Um, the most helpful response I got to that was thank you for posting that, Nancy, and thank you for normalizing that things aren't always going to be great and people aren't always going to have the confidence and people aren't always going to know who they are. That was the most helpful feedback I got. And we're going to do an episode probably about a month or 3 weeks from now about how to give feedback, how to give negative feedback, how to give constructive feedback, and how to receive feedback. The least helpful advice or the least helpful response to the post was unsolicited advice. And Beth always giggles when I say that. You know, I appreciate the intent and I appreciate that. I think that, and I know I'm going down a little rabbit hole. I think it's important that people understand that when you are going through something and when your confidence is shook, you're raw and your nerves are on, it's like, like a frayed wire. So somebody with the best of intention it could backfire and it could not land well. So, I think my message there is that if you're going to talk about it, expect that people are going to give you advice that may or may not land well.
Excellent. Excellently said.
I just put a halo over my head for those of you that can't see me. Okay, so what else? I just almost called you Gail. That's a little strange. I just spent time with my friend Gail.
Right.
So how else to get out of your own way when you're shook?
When you're shook. Well, so we have the thrive list. We have the one little thing at a time. I mean, be kind to yourself. Like one of the things, like that person who said to you, thanks for normalizing this. Folks, we are human. We're human. Right? We're going to have moments. And my father had another saying. I'm not going to say it here because I'm going to have to curse again. But, you're allowed to have a pity pot moment if it's a moment and it's not your life. And you're also allowed to hide in the basement for a few hours.
So I totally agree. And I think, as I look back on those 6 months, all I needed to do was rest and call it timeout. That's all I needed to do. But I don't know if it's arrogant. Maybe it was arrogant. I was too much like, no, this is not who I am. I keep going. I'm an achiever. I do this. I blah, 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 blah. And not resting cost me a great deal, just in terms of mental health, physical health,
Yeah.
emotional well-being. It really did. So I think that I agree. Hide in the basement.
Yep. Well, let's face it, that stuff's inconvenient. And when we have plans and we have goals, we're on our mission, something, we get a flat tire or something, throws a wrench in our system. We don't like it. We don't like it. So.
Yeah, I think that goes back to your father's advice too, that when you're not hitting it on all cylinders, you could be doing everything right. It's just not in your control. And that shook me. That was very difficult for me. So moving forward, I'll know that, you can control what you can control, go back to that list, do what you need to do, and get through it.
Yep.
Right?
Absolutely. Yep. Because this is life, friends. Just hold on.
This is it.
Yep. Hold on for a few minutes. Tomorrow, something new will happen.
Exactly. And if you're from New England like us, it could be 0 degrees one day and 55 the next, which literally happened to me in December. Anything else, Beth? What do the podsters have to look forward to coming up? I'm putting you on the spot, aren't I?
Oh gosh, you are. And we have a pretty hearty list of topics up. So okay, I'm looking at our list right now, podsters. Bear with me.
You want me to? I have it right here. You want me to do?
We are going to talk about at some point rituals and routines, right? To help set up your ride out the storm. No, that's what we just talked about. Okay.
So we're gonna
happens to all of us. We are going to talk about visions and dreams and the difference and visioning for your business and your career in life. We are definitely going to talk about that at some point. We're going to talk about confident conversations, how to have them, right?
And by the way, it's annual review time. And it's also, for those of you who are in business for yourself, setting your pricing time. And we are going to talk about how to have confident conversations when it comes to asking for your raise, asking for a higher rating on your review, advocating for your price increases, not giving things away that you don't need to give away. Some tough lessons there, right?
Yep.
Stop giving away your value.
That's right.
We're gonna do a deep dive on the power of the whys, right?
Yes, the power of the why. We're going to talk about that too, in a different way, really, than what you've talked about before. So don't just roll your eyes at us and be like, "Oh God, the power of the why again. My why, my why." This is going to be a little bit deeper, so it'll be challenging.
Wicked deep.
Wicked.
Okay. So podsters, if there's a topic that you want to hear, reach out to us on all the socials or on our websites or, wherever. LinkedIn. I had a couple people reach out to me on LinkedIn. It made my day. And I think that's probably it for now.
That's it. All right.
All right. Carry on. Remember, when your confidence is shook, it's temporary. Everything is temporary. Do what you know you need to do and don't blow it off like I did. If you do everything you know you need to do, you'll get out of it and you'll come out better on the other side. Yep.
All
okay.
Right.
Until next time.
Adios.
Adios. That's a wrap on another episode of Unmute Yourself, the podcast. We hope you found value in today's podcast. We hope you were able to take a little time for yourself and perhaps think about how you're showing up.
And thank you for all of the great feedback we've been receiving. We'd love to hear more from you about what you think, the tactics you're using every day to speak up, and anything else you'd like to hear about on future episodes of Unmute Yourself, the podcast. You can contact us through our websites. Nancy can be found at nancymedoff.com and Beth can be found at that'saspade.com. Or you can email us at unmuteyourselfthepodcast, all one word, at gmail.com.
We will see you next week, and until then, keep speaking up.